Welcome to DejaVue.
It's your favorite Vue podcast out there. And as usual, this episode, I'm with my lovely co-host, Michael Thiessen. Michael, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, and I have no idea what's going to happen this episode, so that's going to be lots of fun. Daniel Rowe here is our surprise guest. So,
Exactly.
looking forward to seeing what's going to come in the next bit.
Well, hi, it's nice to be. How much of a surprise was it to find me on the podcast? I feel like there would be other guests that were more surprising.
Like who?
I feel if Joe Rogan appeared, it would be more surprising.
I would be shocked
surprised.
in many ways. First of all, how did you get in contact with him?
And why?
There would be a lot of questions. We would be asking a lot of questions, let's be honest.
Okay, there could have been a more surprising guest, but would there be more surprising guests in the Vue ecosystem? Possibly, maybe. But topic-wise, it depends when people watch or listen to this. It could be that they already okay, yeah, it's all clear. But right now, so from you, dear listener, in the past, well, some of us no idea what will happen in the future, as we don't have a...
Most of us have no idea what will happen in the future.
True. Don't have a crystal ball that tells us. But we're here for one big topic, actually, Daniel. Do you want to give it away?
Yes. We're talking about the release plans for Nuxt 4 and ... the release plans for Nuxt 5.
Ooh.
Whoa, Nuxt 5.
Now, if you want to see someone's mind, I don't know, Michael, we should have a reaction video. Michael should be like, this is what I'm thinking at this moment in time. Have you gone mad?
Well, I suspected that it might be Nuxt 4 related because I saw some tweets and I was like, what is going on around Mad Vue? And then I looked to see what's the topic of Daniel's talk here. Oh, beyond Nuxt 4. That's confusing because Nuxt 4 isn't even the present yet. So how can we talk about the future? And I was also confused because I had thought that there were some things around Nitro blocking the Nuxt 4 release. And so I hadn't seen any movement there. So I was like, well, I don't know what's going on. And so I suspected that it might be around this, but I still have questions.
Which questions? Bring them on.
Well, what are the release plans?
That's a good
That's
start.
my main
He's gotten
question.
very specific. That's
Yes.
He's not asked anything about Nuxt 5. I hinted at Nuxt 5, and Michael is just not picking up the bait. He's like,
Well,
no,
I want to go
look,
chronological.
there's been enough hype. I want dates.
Don't give me two major versions, just give me one release date. Yes.
Exactly. So basically the idea is we have been over a year delayed from the original planned release date of Nuxt 4. And that release date was based on a Nitro release date. So we planned to bundle the breaking changes for Nuxt as well as the breaking changes from Nitro into one version and release that. And for lots of good reasons. I should say that, Alex and I and others on the Nuxt team are also on the Nitro team. So, if we're looking at the causes for the delay, obviously we are, involved in that. So for various good reasons, Nitro has been delayed, but always imminent at every step. So we've talked about it before, and we've always decided let's wait for Nitro, make one release. But I think it became apparent more and more that actually people have been trying out the breaking changes for Nuxt with compatibility version 4. People are shipping their apps with compatibility version 4. For anybody who doesn't know that, it's a way of opting into the breaking changes with a flag in your configuration, and that's a bit terrifying to me as a maintainer because it's actually opting into unknown breaking changes. So if we ship a new planned change for Nuxt 4 today, and someone has this flag enabled, they will experience that, and so it's very important to test. All
and
of this
in your
means,
version, I guess.
you have to treat it. You're on the edge if you do this. But all of this means that basically there is a set of changes that people have been testing, people have been using for over a year, which represents our original plan for the next part of those breaking changes. And, our plan was originally one major a year, so it shouldn't be too massive of a set of changes. So rather than continue to delay, Nitro could be out very soon. Nitro could be out within a month. But even if that's the case, I wouldn't like to ship all of those changes suddenly to the people who have already been testing the Nuxt changes for over a year, because suddenly they'll have new breaking changes, new things to investigate. What I would rather do is stabilize the status quo and say, this is a major. Let's be honest. People have been using it. People have been testing it for a year. We're going to ship it as Nuxt 4, which brings with it promises of stability and promises of support. And then, on the same release timetable that was happening originally, we'll ship Nuxt 5, which will come with Nitro, and will also come with some significant changes in terms of our Vite integration, which I've been planning anyway. So, yes, 2 major versions, maybe 2 major versions in a very short space of time.
Okay, so basically, if you've been opting into the compatibility, then in a way you've already been using Nuxt 4, and we're just
In a
making it
way,
official.
Nuxt 4 was the friends we made along the way. Yeah.
Exactly.
So on that sense, I think it's that's a good chance to remind of 2 episodes. We once had the year in review episode, and also actually the hot takes for 2025, both with Daniel Rowe, and he said it will be the year of Nuxt 4. Or did I say that? In any case, we talked a lot about the Nuxt 4 and future releases as well. And same with episode number 13. Yeah, that's been a while. It was called The Road to Nuxt 4, and really happy to see that road. Well, we can see an end to it. We can see that this is slowly but surely going to be Nuxt 4 at that point. Now, as you said, 2 major versions. Do you have any worries about releasing 2 major versions? Like, do you feel that people could be afraid of, like, I don't know, flashbacks to other major version, let's say migrations, feel like, oh my God, we can never move on? Do you have any thoughts on that, Daniel?
So I think our aim was always with Nuxt 4 to reassure people that major versions don't have to be scary. And we've spent so much time doing that, like carefully thinking about backwards compatibility flags, helping people opt in, that, and in fact, someone even said to me, well, it's such a small change. Why even ship it as a major version? And that was a very nice thing to say.
True.
It isn't. It's actually a lot of very significant changes, but done hopefully in a way that feel small in terms of impact on end users' projects. And so, I mean, I think, could people be worried about it? I hope it basically just reinforces the message that we're aiming to ship careful breaking changes. And in this case, we are going to be announcing it, telling people about it. And I'm not going to be continuing with the practice of shipping 1 major a month. I think we'll be reverting back to our plan of about 1 major version every year or so, which feels like a good rhythm for the changes that we end up having to make. We're not aiming to break people's projects, but there are bound to be changes that you need to make every now and then. That seems like a good rhythm for it.
Yeah, also in terms of, like, I don't know, certain dependencies going EOL, like Node 18 is now EOL, and that would be a breaking change to just say, like, okay, it's gone, and at least depending on who you see it. But I think then once a year, especially as you said, with like reasonable changes that ideally you could test out before if you want to, because the compatibility version flag, that will still continue to exist for future major versions, right? You will still be able to opt into certain breaking changes in the future.
Exactly. So you can set it to 5 with the release of Nuxt 4. You can be able to set it to compatibility version 5 and opt into any changes that we make between 4 and 5. I think it's a really good strategy. And I know you've always been a big fan of it, Alex.
True that,
I'm not
yeah.
actually sure who originally proposed compatibility version as an option, but whoever it was a good choice. And it could easily have been you.
I honestly don't remember. I only know the fine-grained part that I was very keen on making sure that you can disable certain parts if your app can like do everything except that one change and you want to work on that, but opt into the rest. That's the only thing. And I also still think this is a very good practice for the future, just so you have always the option to say, okay, there's just this PR. I know exactly what I might have to take a look at my application, and I can deal with that step by step.
From what I've seen online and different people in the community migrating to the compatibility version of Nuxt 4, it seems like it's been a lot smoother and people seem to have really good experiences with it. Like, I haven't seen people complaining or upset. Maybe those people who have like the bigger, more difficult apps haven't tried yet to migrate over as much, but I think there's a lot of, yeah, especially with like the different granular flags and stuff like that, and the the code mods and other things like that, it makes it a lot smoother to do that migration.
Well, that is music to my ears. That's nice to hear. In general, I think the pattern has been reassuring. I was giving a workshop in Tampa last week, and as part of it, we migrated Elk to the Nuxt 4 compatibility version. And we did it in about 15 minutes. But
15,
it was a very...
1.5. That's very important to notice. It's not a small app.
It's a big app. And actually, there's a lot of custom stuff that's been done with it. A lot of custom stuff. So it's not just renaming directories. But it was a pretty straightforward PR and actually fixed some bugs in the app.
Even better.
Exactly, even better. So that was nice to see. I really, 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 really hope people aren't putting months. Well, certainly not months. I hope people don't even bother putting a week in. Except if they have internal processes they have to follow. Like I think that the migration should be pretty straightforward to make.
Also, if anyone is interested in DPR, a link to that is usually in the show notes or description to really see that it could be done in 15 minutes. Also by you, not only by Daniel. I remember like when you told me that during a conference, like I have to look it up. I would be so curious. And I checked and it was like, that all seemed very reasonable. And with the migration guide, especially going through the steps, that will help a lot. And having less moving pieces than in previous major versions as well.
I think so, exactly. Because part of the thing is if people upgrade to Nuxt 4 and they experience something like a behavior change, we can clearly identify it to a change that's happened in Nuxt. And then if they upgrade to version 5, I think we can clearly start looking at Nitro. We'll be also needing that opportunity to test the Nitro changes separately, just because it's such a significant refactor of the server layer. I think it will be beneficial for Nitro as well as for Nuxt.
Good points there. In terms of Nitro, I remember that the original goal, maybe still case of Nitro, is to be backwards compatible from a framework perspective. So that while if you use Nitro standalone, of course, you might have to cater with some breaking changes, that you have to change some things, switch things over. But from a framework level, that might be able, like Nuxt and also other frameworks based on Nitro, might be able to mitigate that and say, okay, for our current major version, we could just say we ponyfill things or set certain things up. Is that still the case? Do you have any insights on that?
If that's the case, so we'll see how it ends up happening for Nitro 3. If that's the case, we would adopt Nitro 3 sooner with any polyfills or ponyfills that we need, if that's available. Well, Puya and I are talking about maybe having an API compatibility layer for Nuxt version 5 and Nitro version 3 going forwards, meaning that future Nitro major upgrades don't necessarily require a Nuxt major upgrade. That would be quite a nice thing.
Nice, yeah.
But regardless, I think it's as much as, and this has been true, like if you think about it for Vite, because Nuxt has been in one version of Nuxt, version 3. We're now up to Vite version 6. And how many of those happened? Was it already up to Vite version 3 when Nuxt 3 was released? Or was it still 2? But regardless, there's been at least 3 major versions that we've put out under minors of Nuxt, which is like a testament to Vite, being able to build these features and majors as well, while letting the frameworks that wrap them have little to no breaking changes to their users. It is also true, I think, maybe that Vite has a slightly different approach to breaking changes. So, for example, Nuxt makes no... This is alluding to something you said earlier. So from my point of view, Nuxt is making no promises about node version. Mm-hmm. So we maintain the current LTS versions. We do not support end-of-life node versions. Even if Nuxt doesn't have a major version update, as soon as a node version becomes end-of-life, code may be pushed to Nuxt that doesn't support that end-of-life node version.
That's why I mentioned it, like, depending on how you see the perspective. I also know that for Vite, for example, Vite 7 is also like coming out and very, very soon. And there's also the point of like, okay, you can drop node 18 now, finally. But I agree that it always depends a bit. While semantic versioning is in fact very clear, it can be taken either very literal or a bit more liberal, depending on also what users expect and what the benefits are.
I think the key thing for me, I mean, the idea of breaking changes, it's about documentation. The question isn't, does your project still work by only updating the Nuxt version or the version of the dependency? It's, does it still do what it was documented to do? Because I think there are a lot of situations where, so for example, if a package specifies a peer dependency and they bump that peer dependency, so saying we need a newer version, is that a breaking change? Personally, I think not. I think bumping a peer dependency to a different major version will mean if you install it with the wrong one, you get an error or a warning. That's the point of peer dependency requirements. It's not a breaking change unless that it's documented that it supports that older version. So I think there are interesting questions here, and I know there'll be certainly people who take a different point of view from me. So
I think the most important part is to be clear with that. I think with Nuxt, I think in the documentation, this is pretty clearly written. So that's always good to know for everybody who didn't know it out there yet. Now you're aware. And that means if you're still not 18, you better upgrade soon.
I think Node actually controversially released security advisories for all versions of Node, basically saying there are no specific issues that we are aware of, but you need to know if you're continuing to use an end-of-life Node version, you are putting yourself at risk. And that is, I think that there were people who said, well, this is an abuse of the security advisory system. But I think one thing it did send was a clear message that you should not be using end-of-life Node versions. It's such an essential thing in terms of fundamental layer, running your code, controlling a lot of things on your computer, that you just should not. You should have a regular release float update as soon as a new LTS. Maybe not the latest version, but definitely as soon as anything is going out of into end of life, you want to be updating. So,
for the next version of Nitro, what are the main breaking changes, new things for that? And for the people who maybe don't fully know what Nitro is and how it fits in with Nuxt, can you give like a brief sentence or two about how that works?
So in Nuxt 2, we had Connect. We used Connect, which is a sort of node middleware type API with request and response objects coming in. Very powerful framework, similar to Express, but a little bit more lightweight. And in Nuxt 3, but basically in Nuxt 2, when you built your Nuxt server, you still needed Nuxt around to run it. And so even your Nuxt config was still processed in production, and Nuxt modules were loaded. And we did some things to optimize that. We had build modules, which meant that you could maybe drop some of those build dependencies like in production. But still, it was possible. People were installing Webpack and SaaS and things like that in production. Not if you really optimized it. If you did, you might be loading stuff, but it was still in the order of 50 meg. Oh, there was still huge quantities of code and dependencies, a lot more than you needed. And it was also optimized really only for running on Node, on a long-running Node server. So when it came to Nuxt 3 and rethinking what we needed for Nuxt, we re-envisioned what that server might look like and split it out into something we called Nuxt Sigma at first, and then it became Nuxt, like at Nuxt/Nitro. And then we pulled it out of the Nuxt namespace totally and said this can be a thing on its own that supports deploying anywhere. Serverless, Lambda, Node Server, Node Cluster, Dino, Cloudflare, anywhere. And not all of these platforms were even available when we started working on it. I think Cloudflare was the most known one that wasn't a classic Node environment. But even so, running a Node server is very different from running an AWS Lambda function or running on Vercel or Netlify. And as we went on, more and more options became available. And until today, there are so many possible options that there's even WentaTC, which exists, which looks at these different runtimes and even has a standardized way of talking about them, naming them. So that whole process meant that we have this separate server layer. It's basically the thing that ends up underpinning all of Nuxt. So the thing that ends up creating that server rendered HTML that we love so much. It's not involved in anything that happens in the browser other than serving the files that the browser needs and serving the HTML that leads to the browser making that initial request. But it's involved in almost everything else that happens on that server, from API calls to caching to the static assets. And it's an entire separate build that happens after the Nuxt part of your app. So if you're using Vite, for example, which you are unless you opt out, you'll see that there's that Vite client build. That's the stuff that goes to the browser. Then there's like Vite server build, which is basically just the equivalent of that browser layer, but for the server. It just renders the bit of HTML in that __ Nuxt div in your HTML. And then everything else that wraps that, well, that's a separate handler in Nitro, which ends up handling that piece of it. And so the Nitro build then happens. It takes in as an input the Vite server build, as well as any other pieces for your server. And then it wraps all of that up and puts it in a nice little package to deploy wherever you want. So whatever deployment platform you might be using.
I think that's a very good summary in terms of what Nitro is doing. One little addition is, of course, as mentioned before, so you can use those standalone as like another HTTP framework to build your APIs in or whatever you want. And we talked a bit about it in, well, more than 50 episodes ago, episode 3 of the podcast. So I think that was a really nice summary, Daniel. Thank you so much for that.
50 episodes ago. That is incredible.
More than 50.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's been a while. Doing that for more than a year by now.
Yeah.
Happy days.
I'd like to also point out that Nitro is used in other Nuxt-like meta frameworks for things beyond Vue. And I'm blanking on what the names are.
Analog, 10-stack start, solid start.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I would love to see more frameworks in that list, honestly, because
Agreed.
The fact is that we're all tackling very similar problems in terms of adapters in different providers. And yeah, it feels like a shame that, to split those kinds of efforts. And I think that is happening, actually. So it's a very optimistic time to be building stuff with Nitro or H3 or any of the other underlying libraries. So, I mean, you asked about breaking changes, Michael, and I can't talk about all of them. A lot of them are coming from some of the underlying layers in Nitro because we've been aligning things with web APIs. So initially, when Nitro was first released, there was no consensus on what those things looked like. So what we had been coming from was Node request and response objects. And controversially, Nitro got rid of that and basically said, we have a new event, an object. You can still access the Node request and response things. They're sort of buried under a couple of layers. And actually, gradually, we made that harder and harder to do and gave people utilities. So instead of accessing, request.headers, you now use get request headers, like a little composable, and so on. Meanwhile, Cloudflare at the time had a request response, like a fetch response based on the fetch API as their pattern. And that seems to be actually what a lot of the ecosystem has gravitated to. So stuff like Hono is using it. Dino has a very similar kind of thing. And actually, well, it's a nice pattern. So we're thinking of moving H3 and Nitro to using that as the foundation of what event handlers look like. Now that can be done in a backwards compatible way, but it is probably one of the biggest changes that people will see and one of the biggest refactors that people will start making to their code base and to those API endpoints.
On that note, a question regarding the format. Is this also what you mentioned regarding Winter CG or now Winter TC in terms of the common foundation that's can speak with all the runtimes?
So it is designed that way, exactly. So there's a new, if you haven't come across Cervix, it's a new and interestingly named Universal Server API, which uses this new request response format, which you can very easily deploy to any of those runtimes. And it actually uses subpath exports in its package JSON to ensure that the actual code that you're running is natively optimized for each runtime. So, you don't have lots of polyfills. This was something we did with Nitro originally. We basically created something that looked like a node request, that any end response, but that would run in any environment. So we're getting rid of that. So now we don't need to create that to pretend to be Node. We can just default to this new native approach of having this request and response. So it's going to make your code faster and smaller, which will be really nice because we're opting into this native approach while still providing that if you are running, in fact, on Node. So it's pretty, I'm very excited. And I shouldn't probably talk about it, but the benchmarks are very nice too.
That doesn't hurt to mention. Even though benchmarks are always flawed. Yeah, but people love them. People love numbers. People love, performance. And it's also good to mention because you don't want to make things slower necessarily.
Even if you just look at it as benchmarking, not even, I'm not, they look good across different equivalent servers and runtimes. But I mean, even if you just look at it from a point of view of our own performance, it's really nice to see new major versions coming out that significantly improve performance as over the previous one. That's the right direction to be going in.
I love the take of just comparing to yourself, first of all, because that's the benchmark people measure you as well. Well,
Yeah.
and then other frameworks, but still comparing yourself is important. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's very helpful. And I think that's also the point of a lot of other things. So, for example, a Lighthouse score isn't that helpful in comparing one website against another website. It's very, very helpful, though, in comparing your own website over iterations as you seek to make it better and improve it.
That checks out.
A lot of metrics are like that, I guess.
I think another question that came to a few people in mind who maybe have read the announcement blog post that is probably out already when the episode airs is maybe it's also answered there. We don't know yet. Why now? Like,
Why now?
Why now? Yes, because of course we talked about it in the past. We could have like pulled the plug early and said, okay, let's release it without Nitro. But was it a sweet spot at the moment? It's like, okay, we have enough changes to justify, quote unquote, a major version, or what led to that point?
So it's not that we're at a sweet spot. If I knew a year ago what I know now, I would have released Nuxt 4 then. So it's not that we've finally gotten to a point where we're ready to do it. It's more that I feel that this will be the best experience for users upgrading. Basically codify what exists. And I think it's always so tempting to say, well, we could wait just another week. But does that other week become another month, become 2 more months? And then in 2 more months, I'm saying, well, if only I had known back then what I know now. The thing is, this is going to be a good experience regardless. So if Nitro comes out in 1 week's time, no problem. We're not delaying our support for Nitro at all. But what we do have is an intermediate major that gives people some confidence that what they've already been using isn't going to just suddenly break because some additional major change is going to be pushed to the edge of our commits. So this is about looking after people who are already there. And I think that's worth doing regardless. And going forward, we're not going to be in this position again, because again, we're thinking about API compatibility with Nitro. And just as we do with Vite, we don't pin or delay our Nuxt releases just based on another tool that we use. We have other options in terms of a framework writing code that is backward compatible, that handles different scenarios, and we can use that in the future.
It also somewhat reduces risk and like the effort to upgrade, I think, if it's split over 2 major changes, because you can do the upgrade to 4 and then, okay, that works. There's, a few things that you maybe had to fix, maybe. And then a little bit later, then 5 comes out and then you can do that upgrade, and it like separates it out and you don't have to necessarily tackle them all at once to like fully get on to the next major.
Exactly. And honestly, people could, if they wanted, choose to wait and just go straight to 5. But I do think that intermediate step is just going to even make the migration more straightforward. Even if you're on 3 and version 5 is out, I would still do it first 4, then 5, because it just makes it, hopefully, quite logically clear which bits of your code you're changing. So you're upgrading 3 to 4, great. Don't touch the server directory. You don't need that.
Except moving it out or like moving everything else in the app folder if you want to keep the server structure.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Maybe you don't touch the server directory if you don't move that and all the rest, so it's not wrong.
Yeah. Exactly.
And also, given the migration guides, it will help a lot. So like, okay, here's a clear cut from 3 to 4, and then you go through that, and then you go through the 1 to 5. I was wondering, because we talked about LTS in terms of Node for a little bit. Now, how are the plans for long-term, or at least term support for the Nuxt major version? So what will happen when Nuxt 4 is out? How will Nuxt 3 be treated? And then subsequently 5 and 4.
The plan is for Nuxt 3 to get a minimum of 6 months of support. That was what we've been saying for a while. And the plan will be, even though we're expecting Nuxt 4 to be very quickly eclipsed by Nuxt 5, so we're not expecting for it to be the active release for very long, but we'll do the same. So we'll give that, again, a minimum of 6 months of support, even though Nuxt 6, goodness me.
Wait, another announcement, Daniel.
Whoa.
we're firing through it. Our new release schedule is 1 a month, right? That's the plan. So even though Nuxt 5 will be the focus, we'll still be backporting features and bug fixes to 3 and 4. So it's going to be some work on us as the team, but I think it will make people's lives easier and better in the upgrade phase. It's worth it.
So let's say, worst case as a maintainer, that means you port things back to 4 and 3 at the same time.
Yeah.
And how about Bridge?
I mean, and honestly, I've been doing this for a year, maintaining both the main branch 4.x and 3.x. Like we've been everything is cherry picked back to 3.x. That's not the active branch.
True.
So yeah, doing it one more, I think it should be doable. A Bridge. Alex. Bridge. Well, so I think the scenario for Bridge is that it's a tool to help people migrate from Nuxt 2 to Nuxt 3. So Bridge itself is it's a Nuxt 2 module. So we are doing our best to look at it. It's not actively being looked after from my point of view, but we thankfully have members of the team like Ryota, who are doing amazing work in keeping it going, which is just fantastic. It probably does deserve a release because there are some nice bug fixes that have been shipped that need to be released. But that's not being actively maintained other than by the community. So and Ryota is part of the ecosystem team. So
and that would mean Nuxt 2 to Nuxt Bridge to Nuxt 3 and then 4 5.
So I mean, if you're migrating from Bridge, I probably go straight to version 4, honestly, or straight to 5.
Or whatever we have when you listen to the episode in a couple of years.
The differences between the whole point, I think, the difference between 2 to 3 is a huge difference.
Yeah.
The difference between 3 and 4 and 5 are not that significant. So it should be, there should be very little different that you need to do. So yeah, you can migrate to version 3 and change it to version 4. But I would just go for version 4. It shouldn't make that much difference to the migration process, other than a different directory structure.
Makes sense.
You haven't asked me about the dates, though. Or maybe you did, Michael. Or maybe Alex, you're just thinking, I
did ask about the dates, but before we get to that, I have a question about if you ever considered just skipping 4 altogether and just sticking with prime numbers as the version release, the major numbers.
I have now. And I think it would start off very promising. And if Nuxt intends to keep going as a framework for some time, it will rapidly become more difficult.
That's true. But actually, the idea of skipping 4, people in the community have voiced that multiple times. Like, oh yeah, you can align it with the number of the year, 2025, get Nuxt 5, and that might still happen now. Yeah. So maybe that was just Daniel's approach to get back on track in terms of aligning that. But yeah, I mean, what would be the benefit in skipping 4 straight away, like PHP did with, well, we all know which version.
My favorite version hack that we did was 3.14159. That was we basically just added additional digits of pi to the version number rather than increment in a normal fashion. That was great. I loved it.
Same. That will always stay in our heart. And probably end up as a Vue trivia question in some quiz.
Exactly.
Yes, probably.
I will tell you, though, one thing I would like to do, maybe I should do it for version 4, is have code names for our minor releases.
Well, like Vue has as well. Yeah.
Like Vue has, because I feel like this is a missed opportunity. So you get thinking.
But what would you name them of? Like, what would you name it after, not of?
Well, I'm not an anime watcher, so I don't really play video games. So if you're looking to me, like I'd be having to do stuff like, I don't know,
Bouldering gyms.
Anthony Trollope, maybe that would be like Barchester Towers. We could do something like. You're not amused. Well, we could have a discussion about this.
No, Daniel. We do a poll. There is no discussion. We do a poll. We let the
community can decide, and Boaty McBoatface will be the next minor.
Yeah, it's like most liked comment on all platforms. We end up with horrible names, but it's fun.
I think it should be something like obscure, so people don't immediately get the reference, and then they have to look it up or something. I think that would be.
How about favorite karaoke songs, Daniel? What do you think about that?
Favorite karaoke song? So the first one would be Row, Row, Row Your Boat, because that is going to be the next song that you and I sing at karaoke, right?
Definitely. So then we have the code name.
And then you can have, when you install it, it plays that minor version's theme song.
Oh my God.
That
A little
would be
animation in
brilliant.
the terminal, like a little boat that's, oh my God.
This would be so bad. This would be so bad, but also genius at the same time.
True
It would
that.
have to play it in a very like video arcade way.
Yes, like a lo-fi, like an 8-bit version or something. Yes,
Exactly.
yes.
It doesn't matter. Even if we have the capability of playing it hi-fi, it has to be as lo-fi as possible.
100%. But we could do it like on the landing page or the blog post or something that like a little link to the play
Actually,
button.
it would be fun. You could actually like while the dev server, like the dev server would be ready, but before you're allowed to develop your site, you have to do like a little platform game, and you like jump, and then like the Chrome like
Yeah, the
internet.
Dino. Yeah.
Exactly. You have to,
Yeah.
that would be fun.
These are all fantastic ideas.
Yeah, we
Little-
should implement them all.
Little
Coming
thing
in
jumping over mountains and collecting green triangles. Oh,
You should code this, Alex.
what did we get us into here?
I think we were talking about the release, the fact that we should have release names, but really the question is, what are the release dates? I shouldn't be
Exactly.
asking that question.
I wanted to ask at the very end, so like everybody is still like intention the whole episode over, and they don't just skip to the chapter mark that it says when release date question mark.
I see.
So
Yeah.
Daniel, drop us the dates. Tell us now. It's time.
So, alpha of Nuxt 4 is already released as of Monday.
Ooh.
But isn't it already released as a future compatibility version 4?
It's not released as of the moment I say this. It's released as of the moment you hear this.
Yes.
Because it will be out on Monday with the blog post. Alpha of Nuxt 4. That's my plan anyway. And then the aim is to have Nuxt 4 stable release out by the end of June. So quite an aggressive release plan.
Wow.
That's tough. Okay, I'll block the June.
How does that sound, Alex? Because I'm aware that this is the first time we have actually talked about it.
Yes. Well, I mean,
You on board? Should we delay?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
That's fine.
Okay.
I'll block the rest of the month. It's fine. I only have one conference that we attend together, and then we're good. Perfect. Crunch time.
Yeah.
I'd like to bring your attention to this.
Problem.
Wait, I'm trying to send a link here to a post that I sent a while ago where I did a ChatGPT generated comic. And
yes.
the date in that
Very
is
interesting.
eerily
Okay.
close. I did not put in my prompt anything about the release date or any
Love
details
it.
about that. Just the actual like panels, and then it just decided to fill that in. And for those listening, it's a comic that I made with me and Daniel Rowe, where I say I know when the Nuxt 4 launch date is, and then it shows my phone that Daniel Rowe sent me a text saying June 13th,
So,
which is
Daniel,
not too far off.
should we just make it June 13th then for the memes?
I've just noticed that in the group chat it says Derry.
Daryl?
It's Derry with an
Yeah, it's an
exclamation mark instead of
exclamation.
an L.
Darren. Oh, God.
Also,
Well,
if
but-
you look at my ear in the first panel, I've got like an extra earlobe.
Or an earring.
It's an earlobe / earring.
Yeah.
It's disturbingly similar to both.
But nevertheless, Daniel, we have still the chance. The podcast is not out yet. We can cut. No, kidding. But the podcast is not out. But should we make it on June 13th, or do you think we need a month of aggressive timing?
We'll see. I'm not averse to releasing it a little bit earlier than the end of June. We also have another person on Blue Sky who said that if we released it on the 23rd of June, he would quit his current job and go back, which he's building Next.js, and he will go back to building Nuxt. So that is also a reason why we might bring the release date up sooner. But if anyone gives me a better offer, any bids, who knows? We could discuss dates.
Then
Bribes.
June 2013 sounds even more appealing. Yeah, the bids are open. Write in a comment what you would offer to Daniel Rowe and the Nuxt team to release it earlier or at all. I mean, now we know it will happen, and we can see the light at the end of the Nuxt 4 road / tunnel, so to say. Daniel, is there anything else that we didn't cover so far that you want to share with the DejaVue listeners and the wider community in the Vue ecosystem, or maybe even beyond that, regarding Nuxt 4 or 5 or 6?
Or 6, which we discussed today, but I wasn't planning on talking about. Nothing more, I think. Only that, this is only really possible because so many people have been testing it. I really appreciate that. So thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks to everybody using the compatibility version, reporting bugs with a minimal reproduction. Always appreciated. Raising issues, contributing as well in all different ways. Yeah. And Daniel, last but not least, where can people follow you? Where people find you?
I'm on, I have a website at row.dev where I can have links to most other things. But I'm pretty much on every social media platform except for Twitter. So give me a DM if you want. If there's anything I can do to help, I'm always happy to be contacted.
Perfect. Then check out the announcement blog post, which is out when you listen to this episode, and also linked, as well as all the other links we've provided. Continue listening if this is not the most recent DejaVue episode, and otherwise, well, we also shared a few about Nitro, the road to Nuxt 4, hot and spicy predictions for 2025, and some of them became true already. So check them out, definitely. And thanks everybody for listening and watching, folks. See you in the next one.